See, some things, especially in America, you do things because you do it because you didn't know you couldn't do it, because you hadn't even heard about it. It's not like you're trying to disprove someone. You just say, well, I'll try that. And so you experiment and come up with new ideas, new solutions, sometimes by accident. And just because you didn't know you couldn't do it, because if you went through the scholarly trail alone, you would, you say, well, everybody says that won't work, so I won't try that. See what I mean? If everything you read and hear says that won't work, you can't use oil flax for fiber, then you never try it. But I mean, how many scientists actually get out and would even try that? Now, the hemp seed and hemp oil are renowned for nutrition, for fuel. The list is huge if you want to get into it. And there's those that say that research in our country is not forbidden, but it's certainly discouraged through, it's being illegal in terms of growing a plant. But there's still some research going on. It's legal in Canada. Industrial hemp has been grown in Canada for 15 years, I think. But as far as I know, they're not doing that great because the Chinese are pretty hard to compete with. That's the last I heard. And I'm hoping that people will rediscover it. And the Chinese are making a lot of money on it now. What's so great about hemp fiber, just in terms of a textile? It's really tough. It breathes. When people wanted bandages in the old days, they would go for the hemp or flax, because both hemp and flax, this is a strange thing, for all the battling of hemp and flax, the fibers themselves, although they come from a much different plant, the fibers themselves are very similar and hard to tell apart. And guess what? Linen is often made of hemp. And if we can get away with calling it linen, then most people, if they even know anything about it, may be assuming it's flax, even today. But bandages were made of hemp or flax bandages because they breathe so much better than any other textile, like cotton, for instance. And Henry Ford was a big hemp advocate. He was trying to grow a car from American soil. And he used hemp oil to grow some 1930s Fords, the body parts. Now in Germany, when Diesel invented the diesel engine, what did they have for volatile oils? They had hemp and canola oil. And so the original diesel engine actually ran on hemp and or canola oil. They didn't have a lot of petroleum in Germany. But that was back in the day when they were trying to see what resource were we going to be using for volatile oils. Well, vegetable oil was a good start. And then petroleum came in, cheaper, and somehow won out. Then what happened with cars? Was it going to be electric, steam, or gasoline? For a while there, the electrics were doing pretty good. But then gasoline was just so cheap and so long range that basically stomped out the electrics. And then the same sort of resource battle was happening in the 30s as the great discoveries of petroleum were made and people were lining up to control the next source of energy, and building blocks, as in timber and petroleum. Anything you can make out of petroleum or wood, that's a lot. can be grown, and it's already growing by the thousands of acres without us even trying. So I think it's one of those conundrums. I hope that people will look back and say, why didn't they grow hemp? Why didn't they grow hemp? But according to my hemp histories, it was all coming to a head in the, in the mid 30s. Hemp was made illegal in 1937, but there were huge breakthroughs, like Popular Mechanics had their great announcement of how they had learned to mechanically process fiber. And that was big news because the handwork involved in fiber processing is good slave labor. It's not something that you're going to get a lot of Americans to do unless they're destitute or in the army or something. So it was all coming to a head, and the petroleum, timber, industrial magnates won out over basically farm-driven resource, grown in your backyard. It was too easy. This is fairly pure cellulose fiber here, which are the tubes that take the juices up and down the plant, right? They're little cellulose tubes. And everything else you got to get rid of through fermentation. And that is a difficult process, and it is stinky. Because when it's just right, it's sort of like it's peak of fermentation or something. I don't know, but you don't wait until tomorrow. In other words, if it's right, you get it out of there now, because then it begins to deteriorate. So you're rotting all the non-cellulose out of there before the cellulose becomes deteriorated. Because the cellulose is much stronger than the non-cellulose, so it rots at a slower rate. And then once it's pure cellulose, or almost pure, then bacteria has a hard time living on it, and it has its ultimate strength and longevity and all that. And that's difficult to achieve. And I have a lot of respect for all the people that could do that. Because we've messed around with that here, and it's a lot of trial and error, and sometimes happy accidents, such as natural bleaching, which was done a lot in the old days. Before chemical bleaching, they would let stuff hang out in the weather, and there's nothing that can clean the cellulose like that to get the impurities out of it. It's, and these are things you find out by accident sometimes, by just leaving it out in the weather. I'm not going to deal with that now, and you leave it out in the weather. And you come back a month or two later, and you see what a miracle has been performed through natural bleaching.